Recording is on. All right, we are here. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to PTP's. This is going to be a demo where you will ask questions, a demo on the new petition feature that Jamie's going to walk us through. I think before we get started, if you want to just in the chat, just write your name, your pronouns, your organization, and maybe where you're at located. That would be wonderful so folks know who's in the room. But in the meantime, here we are. My name is Alice. I'm the director of Progressive Technology Project. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm located on Tonkawa lands here in Austin, Texas. And I just want to introduce you to the rest of the staff if you have not met us all. There's only 3 of us, so all of us are here. And I'm going to have Natalie. Natalie, do you want to just come off mute and say hello?
Sure. Thanks, Alice. Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Brunner, the Director of Operations with PTP, and really glad to be with you here today. My pronouns are she and her.
Thanks, Natalie. Jamie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie. I use he, him, and I am in Brooklyn, and glad to be here with all of you.
Wonderful. Well, welcome. So Natalie and I we'll be here to follow your questions. Jamie's going to go through the demo right now just to show you the features, and feel free to post your questions in the chat, and we may interrupt if it's something that Jamie needs to stop to address. Otherwise, we're going to have time afterwards to then open it up and have more questions and get in deeper. All right. So anything else, Natalie or Jamie, I forgot to mention before we get started?
All right. Well, thank you, Alice, for the intro, and thanks everyone for coming. You know, I was thinking 15 years ago, I never imagined that I would be spending a year writing software to help people do electoral, like election work. And, you know, part of it is I thought 15 years ago, I thought by now, surely the revolution will have happened. And I don't know, maybe we'd be drinking cocktails at our People's Assembly or something like that. I don't know. But really, the problem was I wasn't reading my history. You know, we know that from the moment you could vote in this country, we've been disenfranchised. And however obscene the methods are now for disenfranchising us, they're mild compared to the methods that have been used in the past and could be used again in the future. So now I'm actually very grateful to have the opportunity to work on this type of thing and to work with all of you that are doing electoral work and to figure out ways that we can do it better. So with that, I also want to do a shout out to the folks that have been particularly helpful in debugging and troubleshooting. I don't know if anyone from Virginia Interfaith Center is here, but you all have been really fantastic in helping us get this stuff sorted out. New Economy New York folks also, but thanks to everyone who has helped with that stuff. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to address 2 problems that you might have in your organizing and how to get around them. One is that you want to do electoral district level organizing. In other words, you want to specifically reach people in your database represented by certain elected officials. So you can call them, email them, send them postal mail, canvass them, whatever. You want to do this, but you don't know which elected officials represent which people in your database. So that's one problem that we're going to be able to address. And the second is that you want to create a petition, an online petition. And when someone signs it, it will send an email to the elected official represented by the person filling out the petition based on the address that they provide. So those are the 2 biggies that we're going to cover in this particular demonstration. There are a few limitations to what I just mentioned that I want to get out of the way first before we dive in. The first is that our system can be used to look up the districting information for House members, House of Representatives. You can figure out which district people are in, but our petition system is not going to send them an email. You can't do a petition that sends an email or targets a national level elected official. In most people's experience, that's not effective anyway. But the reason we can't do it is because we can only reach people who have an email address, and national elected officials don't generally make their email addresses available. Second uh, limitation is that for doing these lookups, the address lookups, we have to depend on a third-party service to do that. And the third-party services aren't perfect. So we're going to go over which those services are and what the pros and cons are of each one. But we do have to keep in mind that sometimes some services just don't have the data for particular areas and particular regions. So it's important to test it and make sure that it works for your particular use case. And then the last limitation is just that, sometimes for some services, it's going to cost money. And that's not money you pay to PowerBase, it's money that you would pay to this other provider. And we really are providing the software that makes the connections, but that it's not always going to be free. It's not a lot of money, but it's not always going to be free. And again, I'll cover that in more detail later. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. All right, you able to see my screen?
Not yet for me. Can anybody see
Okay.
Jamie?
I
Yes,
can.
Okay.
I see it.
All right, I'm getting some thumbs up. If anyone is not able to see my screen, you may want to try refreshing your browser. Looks like most people are able to do it. And Paul, if you could just type your question into the chat, that would be great, if you haven't already. Okay, so the first place I'm going to start is by reminding folks that this is a demo. Unfortunately, in an hour, we can't train everyone on how to do this. So instead, our goal is going to be to demonstrate what can be done. And I'm going to start even by showing you how you can get more information on how to do it. So in your database, you'll be able to do this, but I'm just going to show you in this demonstration. If you go to the support menu and go to PowerBase FAQs, I click on there, I go straight to our frequently asked questions. And in the search, you can type electoral and hit enter. And the two articles that pop up, one is called Petitions and one is called Using the Electoral API Extension. These two articles cover everything that I am going to be covering in this presentation. So that is the place to go afterwards if you want to get more detail. As Alice mentioned, we're also going to record this, so we're going to make the recording available. So two places to get that. All right. Now, there are two, as I mentioned, there are those articles, there's two articles because there really are two pieces of functionality that we're going to review. The first piece of functionality is called the electoral extension, and that is the brains of the operation. This is the part that is able to look up an address, and then based on looking up that address, it is able to fill in the electoral and district information for a given address. And that part's critical, obviously, if you want to do those lookups. The second part is the petition part. And the petition is the one that handles setting up the petition and then telling the petition that you want to do a lookup. So if all you're interested in doing is finding out which districts your contacts are in, you only need to do the electoral part. If, however, you want to do petitions that do this kind of dynamic lookup, you'll need to do both the electoral part and the petition part. So with that said, I'm going to start by setting up the electoral part. I'm going to go to the Administer menu, And from the Administer menu, go to System Settings. And from System Settings, there's an option called Electoral API. In your database, if you don't see this, contact support will make sure you have the right parts configured. Once I click on the Electoral API configuration screen, you get a blank screen here. The first item to fill out is called Data Providers. If you do a drop down, you'll see that there are 3 available providers. And I'm going to pick each one so that we can see them all together. Normally, you wouldn't pick all 3. You'd choose one, the best provider that's going to work for what you're looking for. And when you choose each one, a field appears asking for your API key. That's like your password for using it. And there won't be an API key that pops up on your database because you'll need to get your own API key in order to fill this out. Now, the 3 service providers, each one will have a link where you can click on the link, and from this link, you can apply for your own API key. Now, the question is, the most important question is which one to use? Well, that depends. Open States is my personal favorite. Open States is a nonprofit organization that depends a lot on volunteer labor. It is completely free. It is completely open. And I've found the folks that run it to be very honest, helpful, and responsive when I've asked for help. Um, the main limitation with Open States is that they only provide lookups for state level elected officials. So if you're doing a statewide campaign and you need to do lookups for state senate or state legislators, or you want to do a petition that targets state senators and state legislators, that is the one to go with, and that'll work out great. And I just want to remind folks to mute yourself, if you don't mind. I just muted someone. Now, if you, that's going to work great if state-based elected officials is what you're after. However, if you are targeting city council members, then the Open States API is not going to suffice because they do not have data on city council members. Um, Moving up in the list is Google Civic. Google Civic is also free, uh, at least free from a cost perspective, but you are going to pay the price of surveillance as we do anytime we use a Google product. The other problem with Google is that in our experiences, their data is not consistent. They have great data on some places and some locations, and in other places, they just don't have any data. It seems like it's a neglected area within Google. I'm not exactly sure why. So your mileage may vary with Google Civic. Mm. The last provider is Cicero. And Cicero, in our experience, has the most reliable data. Cicero also sponsored the development of some of this work. They didn't pay us, they paid another developer to help add that. So, I appreciate their sponsorship of this free and open source project. Uh, but they, in our experience, have the most reliable data, and they also cost money, was the main downside of Cicero. It's not a lot of money, but they charge you per lookup. And they have a package where if you buy it through the nonprofit tech provider TechSoup, you can just spend like $30 and you get 4,000 addresses looked up. And otherwise, you pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 for 1,000 lookups. So it's not terribly expensive unless you have like 100,000 addresses to look up. But even then, it can be a one-time cost that you can use to district all of your addresses, or you're really going to be paying based on how many people sign your petition, and you can kind of calculate that out. Um, so that is a run through of the 3 different providers and the pros and cons of each. With that said, I'm going to leave Cicero as our example here. Once you've chosen your provider, there's a few more fields to fill out, districts to look up. If you want, you can do country level, state level, county level, city level. These are available for all the different providers. If you use Cicero, you also have the option of getting voting, judicial, police, and school district information if it's available. These will cost an extra credit. So if you are pulling these in, you're going to go through your credits twice as quickly. Um, and I'll also just point out that we don't have a whole lot of experience with these. So yeah, let us know if you do need that information. We'd love to work with you to make sure that it works. Then we're going to say address location. As most of you know, addresses in your database, um, they you can have multiple addresses and you can code them to different locations. Um, this is a way that you can say, hey, when doing address lookups, only use the home address because someone might have a work address and we want to code it based on their home address because that's probably their voting district. However, if you don't reliably have addresses coded to home, you might want to choose primary instead. Primary is the default location type. Everyone in everyone's database has at least one primary address, so this is a good category to use if you want to be sure that it's going to look up, that it's going to have a successful lookup. Here is ways that you can limit your liability. Um, in other words, if you say, hey, we're doing a campaign in one country and one state, you can make sure that lookups won't happen if someone types in an address or you're entering an address from somewhere else. In this case, I'm going to leave it as the United States, but I'm going to say we're going to allow lookups for all states, all counties, and all cities. And then lastly, you can make it automatically look up the district every time you add or update an address in your database. And you have the option to create an official. In other words, if you enter someone's address and you can add their district information automatically by default, this feature would also add to your database who their elected official is as a contact in your database. Um, and I see Beth has a question. Is there a service that provides addresses if you have other info like name plus email? That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that, Beth. Because yeah, you definitely would need address information for this to work, and if you don't have people's addresses, you'd have to go with a different service. I'm wondering if other folks on this call might have any suggestions for Beth or any services that you might have used for filling in that info. And we'll see what folks have, and I am going to move on to the next step. So once you've entered all of this information, you can click Save. And once you've saved this information, we now can do one of two things. One is if you want to update the district information for people in your database. In other words, you're not doing petitions. You just want to update the information. You can do that via what's called a scheduled job. So if I go to Administer, System Settings, and Schedule Jobs, what I can do is say a new scheduled job here. I'm going to call it District, let's see, Add District Info for Contacts. And I'm going to say I want to run this once an hour. Here we're going to select the electoral. Here. And districts goes here. And then we can set certain parameters. And this is all in the documentation, so you don't have to feel like you have to memorize this. But I can say limit to 100 contacts each run. I can say groups equals my group, like so, and update equals 1. So limit would say every time this job runs, only do 100 lookups at a time. You could say 100, you could say 1,000. Usually I start with a small limit to make sure everything's working fine, and then I might increase the limit. For groups, it means only run this on the contacts that are in a given group. This is a really important feature. It allows you to say, okay, here are the groups that these are the contacts that I want districted. I don't want you to do the entire database. We don't want to pay for the entire database. We only want to run this on these particular groups. You can give the name of the groups like that. Update equals 1, you probably don't want that. Because if what update equals 1 does is it says, even if somebody already has their district information in there, do it again. So in other words, update equals 1 is a useful feature if your region has gone through a redistricting and you know that people already have their district information, but it's now wrong, or it might be wrong. Update equals 1 ensures that it will get reset. And once that's set, you make sure it's enabled and you can save it. Like so. And then once it runs, it will fill in everybody's districting information. Uh-huh. And that is pretty much it for the districting information. The way the information shows up, if you go to find contacts, just pick any contact that we have. The data shows up in a section down here called Electoral Districts. When you click on it, here there's no electoral districts for this person. When it's filled out, you will see this listing all of the information that has been looked up for that particular contact. Okay. And that is the quick demo on how you do the initial setup and how you would set things up to redistrict the folks in your database. The second phase, which I'm going to go over, is petitions and petition email. And after that, we will open it up for questions that people might have. So if you want to do automatic lookup via petitions, you first have to go through that step that we just went through so that the system knows how to do the lookups. Then you can go to the campaigns menu, dashboard, and petitions. And here's where we'd see a list of your petitions. I'm going to click on add petition. And petition title, don't do it. I'm going to give an, this is where you could add images, videos, whatever you want to show up on your petition page. Please don't do it. The contact profile. This is the profile of fields that you want people to fill out in order to submit this petition. And everyone should have a default petition contact fields right here, which will give you the standard petition fields, such as first name, last name, things like that. This allows you to manipulate that. If you want to ask for special fields or different fields or change that, you can come up with any profile that you want. The activity profile, this is a legacy of an older version of petitions. It's still here just so you can get the maximum flexibility. This would allow you to add yet more questions that you'd want to put up there. If you had specific questions or specific fields that are only relevant for this petition, you could do it. 99% of the time, you don't want to set an activity petition at all. So I'm going to leave that blank for us. For the thank you page title, I'm going to say thank you. And yes, I see Florentina, you have a question. I'm going to finish this page and then I'm going to check that out. Thank you. Thank you for submitting. We continue down here. We get to bypass email confirmation. This is an option where you can have people fill out the petition, and when they fill it out, they don't have to get an email, click through the email to confirm that their email is valid. By default, that'll happen. By default, you set up a petition, someone signs the petition. It's not signed until they receive the email, and then they click on it saying, yes, this really is my email. Bypass email confirmation skips that stage. Um, our general recommendation is that you usually do want to bypass email confirmation because most people will ignore those emails when they come in and then they won't get counted on your petition. But you also want to be sure to disable your petition after the campaign is over. You don't want to leave these petitions up because then the spammers will come in and yeah, it won't be great. Um, so we say bypass email confirmation and then and then be sure to disable it afterwards. You could optionally add a region that will provide a Twitter, Facebook, etc. Share icon. Let's make sure it's active. Let's make sure it's default. And then the last step down here are the petition email delivery options. So I'm going to take a quick break there and let's see if Florentina asks, since policymakers are always changing, do we have to go in and do that first part consistently or does it automatically update? So what the districting information does is it records what district you're in. And you can optionally have it add the elected officials themselves to your contacts. But normally you wouldn't do that and you would just have the district. Um, so in that sense, that even though your elected official will change from year to year, unless your region goes through a redistricting process, the districts should stay the same. So you shouldn't have to do that again. Um, and Beth is asking what default means. You know, there's, I think there's some place somewhere where it will show you whatever the default petition is. Honestly, it's not. It's barely matters. It doesn't really matter whether it's the default version, and I'm not even sure why that was added to this particular program to choose the default. Not a big impact. Um, Moving down to petition email delivery options, message template. You can, if you want, create your own message template if you wanted to add your logo or things like that. But normally you don't want to do that. You want to make this seem like these are regular people that are submitting this and it's not necessarily branded to your organization, but you have that choice. Normally you just want to take the generic sample petition email template, which is going to be used to email the targets. Email recipient system. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. Um, Static recipients is always available. If you choose static recipients, it means that you are going to specify who's going to get an email every time this petition is filled out. Um, and the person who's going to get the email has to be added to your database. In other words, your enemies have to be in your database. I guess that's like, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. But you do have to put the targets in your database so that you can select them here. You can start typing them. We'll say Christopher Abbott right here. If we stopped here, well, actually, we have a few more fields to fill in. But if we stop here, then everyone who fills out the petition is going to generate an email to Christopher Abbott. This is the model you'd use if you're targeting the governor, for example, because everyone, you're targeting the governor in a particular state. Everyone has the same governor. You don't even need to use the electoral business. There's no dynamic lookup. Everyone signs it. It always sends an email to the governor. Simple, done deal. Now, the more exciting is if you choose, instead of static recipients, you choose one of the options. Now, the options that show up here depend on what you have configured in the electoral extension. Because we only configured Cicero, we're only seeing the Cicero options. If you configured open states, you would see the open states options. If you configured Google Civic, you'd see the Google Civic options. In this case, I'm going to choose Cicero and I'm going to choose City Council to say I want to do a petition in which we are going to target City Council members. Now, once I do that, we get a bunch more fields popping up because now the petition wants to say, okay, you want to do that, we're going to have to use the address fields, but I don't know which address fields to choose. So it's asking us, from the profile you chose, which is the street address field. And it has a pretty good guess, you'll see. Yeah, street address goes to street address, city goes to city, state goes to state, and postal code goes to postal code. So now we're sure the system knows when someone fills out this petition, it knows how to get their address so that it could send it to Cicero and find out what district they're in. Now, there's a couple more fields that are important to fill out up here at the top. The first is the petition from email address. Now, I'm going to put in info@progressivetech.org. Now, this one generates a lot of questions and is a little bit confusing, so I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain it. Um, when someone fills out this petition and sends a message to our target, the email message is going to be sent from the address that we fill out here. Now, normally you'd say, well, wait, I don't want that. I want the email message to be sent from the person who is filling it out. If someone comes and fills it out and they say that their email address is joe@gmail.com, the message going to the target should be from joe@gmail.com. Now, the reason we don't do that, because I agree, that's intuitive, that's sensible, it makes perfectly good sense. The reason we don't do that is because that message will probably never get delivered. And the reason it will never get delivered is because the target person, their email system will get a message that claims to be from gmail.com, and they'll see that it wasn't sent from gmail.com. It was sent from PowerBase. And this is the new reality we live in, where people can forge emails, and we're trying to stop that. Because of those new restrictions that have that have been put in place over the last few years, it's really harder and harder to send a message from an email address unless you can really prove that it was sent from that service provider. So that's the limitation we have, is that we can't send a message that's from a Gmail account without being flagged as fraudulent. We can't send from a Yahoo account. We can't send from all of those things. We really have to send from your email address in order for it not to be flagged as fraudulent. Now, on the bright side, when this message is sent to the elected official, it will come from info@progressivetech.org, but in the body of the message will very clearly state the email address of the person who filled it in. If the elected official hits reply, the reply will go to the person's email address that filled it in. Really, the only email address that's going to be visibly from you is going to be just that from address. And that's why we have to do that. I'm going to take a minute and see there's some comments. Katie's asking if you compare dynamic and static, and the answer is yes. You'll notice that when we switched from static to Cicero, this to field remained. So we can do both the governor and the state representatives at the same time. Also point out that there's a BCC field. Sometimes it's useful to put your address there and then you get an email every time someone sends it. That's available for static or any of the others. And Kristen asks, when you're selecting Cicero City Council, for example, you'd need to remove Christopher Abbott. Right. Yes. Again, depending. Maybe Christopher Abbott's the mayor, and we want the email to go to your city council person and also the mayor. And that would be an example when you'd want to keep it. But if not, if you really are just targeting city council, then you're right. You'd X out of Christopher Abbott and get rid of that. And Marquis says, what happens when our email address gets blocked? Yes, Marky, when your email address gets blocked by your target, that's when you release a press release and you've won. Because now you can say, so and so doesn't want to hear from us anymore. Clearly, we've had an impact. But yeah, that's the. And then if you really want to get around it, then you do your next petition from a different email address, and you can keep merging. You can keep varying them if you want. But I would take that as a publicity stunt and really go with it if you get blocked. And let's see, Paul Kelly, with multiple emails coming from one address, it will trigger spam blocking. It might. Honestly, spam blocking is incredibly sophisticated. at this day and age. And most of the representatives, if they want to block petitions, they can do it without depending on the same from address coming from everyone. Um, as much as I'd like to be able to create a petition email system where it really seems like people are just randomly sending them email, it's very difficult to do. And I think that it's going to be clear to most elected officials that they're being targeted by a campaign. Um, and Charlotte, is the from email address always info at Progressive? Yeah, no, you would definitely, as Alice says, you definitely want to use your particular email address. And if you want to know if you're getting blocked, it's a good question. I um, huh. There's a few ways it might happen. You might get bounce backs to your info at progressivetech.org because bounce backs won't use the email address that's embedded inside of it. Um, I believe that's what it would do. But yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to put that on my list to research and experiment with. Um, okay. Um, so with that said, we have a few more fields to pull in here. I'm going to say uh, these two fields.
Jamie,
Yes.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have one question from Florentina
Oh,
that Florentina's used the petition feature and used open states. One limitation is that we want to select committees, but we have to email all reps. Does Cicero do committee level databasing?
thank you. Thank you, Natalie. I missed that and I apologize, Florentina. So the question is, you want to target committees? You can't dynamically target committees. But is that a thing? You could definitely have a petition and select more than one person in the to field. In this to field, you could add, 10 contacts, and then all 10 contacts would get it. Um, um, and you could dynamically target the particular state rep and also the 10 people on the committee. Um,
And it looks like Sheila is suggesting a workaround as well,
okay.
making the
Oh, yes.
petition send to state reps and then send out the alert about the petition to only residents of the district represented on the committee.
Yes, thank you. And yes, Michaela, that is exactly what we're going to do next. So here I'm just going to do the last few fields. Subject, don't do it. Default message, please don't do it. This is the subject and the message that's going to appear by default on the petition that other people can change if they want to. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And now that my petition is saved, I can use this dot, dot, dot menu. And I see that there's a sign link there. And this is the link that I'm going to click on in order to sign it. And here we have it. Now, don't do it is the title. Please don't do it is what I put as the description. Hopefully you'd have something a little bit more compelling than that for your particular petition. And then here, I'm going to fill out the information at example.org. And here I'm going to type in my actual data, New York, and then make sure. And then you'll notice as soon as I hit that postal code, Crystal Hudson pops up, my city council representative. It pops up here, letting me know that when we submit this, it is going to be it's going to be emailed to Crystal Hudson, who is my legislator. Down here is where I can change the subject. Please don't do it. I'm Jamie. I saw you in the neighborhood last week. Please don't do it. Like so. And once I've filled this out, I'm going to hit send. And here it tells me, because I had Christopher Abbott as the static one, it tells me that it sent it to Christopher Abbott and it sent it to Council Member Hudson Crystal. Okay. And with that said, it's like, okay, cool. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Jamie. I'm going to silence my signal messages and look up what I just filled in. Here I am. Source, petition signature, don't do it. Here's my email address. Here's my regular address. And I'm going to go under activities. And here I say I have one activity that indicates that I signed a petition. And then there's an email activity also. And the email activity is with Abbott Christopher and one more. Take a peek at that. And here we can see that that email activity is with Abbott Christopher and Crystal Hudson. And we can even see the details of the email that was sent out. It's pasted right in here, including my customization of it, like so. And also, we can see that if I look up Crystal Hudson, that now, Crystal Hudson has been entered into our database. Now you'll notice that Crystal Hudson's an elected official. Crystal Hudson's not bad as a city council person. I wouldn't necessarily consider her an enemy, even though we might consider all elected officials enemies. But you'll notice that Crystal Hudson was entered, but she was entered with do not email. This is a safeguard because the petition system is going to be adding elected officials to your database. And you may not want elected officials to receive your newsletter or to receive any of your emails. So by default, they're going to be added with do not email set. Now, this doesn't mean they're not going to get the target petition email. That ignores this setting and says you're a target, you're going to get the email. But this will ensure that they're not going to show up on your email lists. So, and then you'll notice that there is an activity linked to me. So once you have your petition running, you can look up the elected officials and you can see an activity for every single one of their constituents that signed the petition, which gives you some good information about which of your people are responding to petitions and who their elected officials are. Okay. So yes, I know. People do want to know. There's always something that they shouldn't be doing. Okay, that is a quick run through, not a very quick run through, a slow run through. Time has flown. I'm going to stop there and see what other questions folks might have. Yeah, very
I
funny.
see Marquise has their hand up. Do you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. As as a as a member, for example, who is signing a petition, correct me if I'm wrong, they had the opportunity to add their own subject line and text to
That is
that petition.
correct.
What if we don't want them to be able to manipulate it to distort the message that we're sending out?
Yes, that is an excellent question. At the moment, there is not an option to turn that off. But that is something that I'm definitely going to take notes on as a feature to be added in the future. At the moment, it is not possible to turn that off.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions that folks have?
Oh wait, there was another one.
Yeah.
If you click the it once the elected official is added to your database and they are automatically marked do not email,
Yep.
will they not receive an email on say your second petition because they're noted that way?
No, the petition system ignores that do not email. The petition system says if you're a target, you're going to get an email. It doesn't matter what your settings are. So they will always get emails in the future for the petition system, but not for any other bulk message system.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. And I see Toby has a question. Can you create a group of contacts to put in the to field? Yes, unfortunately, no. You would have to select those contacts one by one instead of using a group. But that's another great feature idea. Are there any other questions that people have? Anything else? Yeah, Katie, go ahead. And you are on mute if you are talking now. Still, there you go.
Sorry, new system. Can you clarify the auto updates for, there's a feature you can check a box, auto update when you change an address or when you add a new person? So we end up merging a lot of records, like when we're deduping, or we just merge a lot. So would it charge us every time we merge? How does it know it's a new address or you're updating an address?
So it would not run on merge. You know, there's a lot of gray area in that. That's certainly true, and a lot of kind of corner cases. But it would the way it knows is that you know there's something called a hook in the database, and the hook is fired every time you update or add a new item, a new thing. And there's a particular hook on the address record. So the update would run every time you update an address, which is not exactly the same thing as updating a contact. So anytime a new address is added to a contact, it might trigger. Anytime an existing address is edited, it might trigger. And generally speaking, I would recommend if you do want to keep all of your contacts districted, that you experiment with it, but you definitely do a 1-week trial period and try to see review after a week to see if it operated successfully and also to see how many credits that it cost you. Um, um, and Paul Kelly, can these district lists be pulled and used for in-person GoTV activities? Yes. And by that, I believe you mean, can you search for everyone who's in a particular district and then make a group out of them or do a survey with them or any of that? And the answer is yes. All the information that gets added in these electoral districts is available using the regular search features, and you can definitely do that searching so that you can find everyone in District 12 or something like that. And are these new electoral fields? Yes. So yes, they are technically editable, and technically you can upload into them. I'm hedging a little bit because I'm trying to, you know, it's one of those things where whenever you're synchronizing data, there's all kinds of trouble that we can get into. But in theory, yes, you can do that, Katie. You definitely can edit them. You definitely can modify them. And, you know, we should talk workflow to make sure that we get the big picture and make sure that you're not going to end up overwriting things or losing data or stuff like that. That would be my fear, is that any field that can be automatically synchronized, you have run the risk of putting in all this manual work and then having it all lost because it then got synchronized. But generally, yes, you could do that. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Beth.
So earlier on, there was the thing about matching with one of the address fields, and you chose street field, and there's also the billing address. And so I'm wondering, for some folks, you only collect the billing address. Is there a way to like choose multiple address options and to like have it prioritize one over the other?
That's another great feature idea, but it is not possible. At the present, you basically have two choices. One is you check the location type that you definitely only want to use, home or work, usually home, and then you miss out on people that don't have a home address. And the second is that you choose primary, in which you say whatever your primary address is, pick that one. And then you'll never miss out because everyone with an address is going to have a primary address. But if their primary address is their work address, they're going to be districted based on their work address, not their home address. I think your suggestion of having the priorities would be ideal. If you could say home, then work, then primary, would be a better way to do it. But that's not possible at this time. Are there other questions that folks have? We've got about 5 more minutes. I'm going to return to the land of the video. Go ahead, Katie.
I think my question is, so sometimes we use PowerBase for this kind of contact petition activity, and sometimes we use Action Network because
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the reason we like Action Network is it's got a real clean, like if you send people there, it's clean, pretty. So how do these, can you remind me how these Action Alert petitions function on their own? I get it if you're sending people there as a link. Can you just show us what that looks like? I'm blanking. Does that make sense?
No, sorry. How you like? What would be
So
the general workflow to get people to go there?
yeah, what's the live link look like? And maybe you showed it and I
I
stepped
see.
out.
Nope, I don't. I am not sure I did. Let's see.
I see the
So,
back end, but I didn't see the finished petition, I don't think.
right. Okay. So, well, first, to show the finished petition, I'm going to go back here. And this, again, it's not a great example because I don't have a whole lot of text here so that you can see it. But you're able to format this, please don't do it, and add multiple paragraphs and things like that, all that you want. By default, um, it's going to use your theme. So whatever your particular theme for your PowerBase is, that's how it's going to look. We can change and modify that if you want. Oh, yes, I am sharing right now. I've sorry if folks are not able to see. Are people able to see what I'm sharing?
I can see.
Okay, some people can see. All right. Um, thank you. If you're not able to see, you may need to refresh. Sorry about that. So by default, you're going to see your text at the top, and then the forms to fill out are at the bottom. We can change that. We definitely have done themes where you stick your text on the left, and then the fields to fill out for the petition are on the right, which I think is what Action Network does by default. There's lots of wiggle room for making your petitions look the way you want them to look and for improving their look and feel. Um, And then up here is an example of what the link would look like that you would send out. All right. All right, we just have a couple more minutes, maybe chance for one more question before we close. If anyone has any other questions. And if not, we can also wrap up. So again, I want to thank everyone for coming and really thank you for all the organizing work that you do. And I think I can speak on behalf of Alice and Natalie in saying that we look forward to collaborating with you on doing this work in the future. So thanks, everyone, and we will see you. And I know that some people are raising their hand to speak, but it's right next to the thing for clapping. So I think most people are clapping, and we're on our way out. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Nice
Thanks,
to see you
everybody.
all.
We'll send the
Thanks.
recording out in a little bit. Bye. Thank you. Ha They're all playing. All right, I'm going to stop this recording that I did already, but I didn't stop recording.